father served during World War II, but a lot of the story really on my dad's side of the family was this chance that we'd been given as a family to be able to come to a place that was new. There wasn't the religious persecution, et cetera, that they'd had before, and that they wanted to be able to give back. And so you hear that growing up, and I knew at a very young age, and so did my older brother who ended up going to the military academy, that we wanted to be able to serve in some way, whether that was
but to get into the Army, that's a big deal.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I think, and this is, I think, where an advantage of mine was that both of my grandparents had served in the military, with grandfathers, and then my dad had served in the Army. He was in the Army Reserve. He was in the Navy during Vietnam. And from that, you have enough familiarity with it that you understand that it's not necessarily a scary thing to do, that it's a profession just like a lot of other professions, and that it's a great way to be able to go somewhere, meet a lot of new people that are different than you, be able to focus on something that's a long-term objective or mission that everyone has in common, and then be able to take all those skills and all of that that you've learned, a life experience, and be able to come back and do something different. And so my goal is that I competed for a Reserve Officer Training Corps scholarship. So I went to George Washington University in DC, which my parents were kind of lower middle class. There was no way I was going to be able to go to a private school. So that allowed me to go to a private school. I graduated and then I came into the Army Reserve. So I worked in politics for a couple years in DC, was all set, and so I came back.
What was that like?
Working in politics?
Yeah.
It's as you would imagine. I think it's a lot like the entertainment industry. You have a lot of good people who really want to do something meaningful, but at the same time, you have a lot of people who are there because they want to have a spotlight shown on them. They want to be the person who steps in and is seen as the hero or the big idea person or whatever. And Hollywood, for that matter, it's the numbers of people that are here not for the work, but they're here for the stardom.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be. Those two things shouldn't be separate.
Right.
And so, so I left politics and came to entertainment. And so I moved out to Los Angeles. So one frying pan into the fire. And
I love it though. It's great.
Yeah. And then started working in production. Worked in production for about 2 years. And was making decent money, and then
I was when I met you.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. I was your sound guy on one of your demo reels.
I know,
and
right?
then
so long ago.
Yeah,
my goodness.
It's crazy. It's so crazy. But and then I was working on a pilot. Everyone's, as we used to say, a Jay Leno story is that I was working on a pilot for Amblin Entertainment. I was a production coordinator. One of the actors didn't show up. I fit his costume. I got stuck in his costume. Got Taft-Hartley, so got admitted into the union, and then the set photographer was like, "Hey, I'm going to do headshots for free," and I was like, "Oh, that sounds fun." And everyone thinks that I want to be an actor anyway, so it'll be funny to send to my family.
But you didn't want to be an actor.
I didn't. That wasn't my plan.
You just fell into it.
Kind of, yeah. And I know a lot of people right now hate me for saying that.
That's all right.
But so, and then from that, ended up. Through him really getting, through that photographer, getting an audition for Young and the Restless for a pretty small role, but under 5, so for AFTRA, and then was on the show for about 5 months consistently and was making, again, decent money.
Of course, yeah.
And it was fun, and I was around a lot of people that I thought were smart, and they were really working hard, and I was like, this is something that I think I could maybe make a living of, and so I started dedicating myself to it a little bit more. Did a couple commercials, and then got cast in a movie called Deep Blue Sea with LL Cool J.
Ooh.
And it was Rennie Harlan was the director, and just a couple days before we were supposed to leave to go film it, my brother, who had been a decathlete at UCLA, younger brother, and he had transferred to the University of Wisconsin, committed suicide. And so I didn't go do that.
Yeah.
I went home instead. And
so this was basically an acting dream that was about to happen, and then this happened.
Right. And so for me, it was what's more important.
Of
which is, it's an obvious answer, but at the same time, I was also
questioning.
I was 26,
yes.
25, and so didn't do all of the things I should have done business-wise here. I didn't let everyone know what was going on, and I think they probably would have understood.
Oh, I would think
Instead, I literally
yeah.
just bought a ticket and left. And so that wasn't great career-wise. But then when I went back, my brother and I had shared a room growing up, so we were really close, and so I'd done a lot of stuff to sort of settle his affairs. And then I was cast in not Brokeback Mountain, but I was cast in a small independent cowboy movie, and I had maybe told a white lie about being able to ride a horse, and I found out this while I was in Wisconsin, dealing with all this stuff, and I'd been there for kind of about 3 months, pretty sad, focused on a lot of other stuff.
What was it though that got you through that time? Because it's your brother, and
Yeah.
it wasn't just like an accident.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you deal? I've had actually suicide in my family too. So
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry as well. But how did you wrap your mind around that? Because I know when it happened, my cousin that I was close to did, and it made me very angry, and then like mixed emotions. It's not just,
Yeah, so I would say at the immediate point, it was mainly friends and family. So and this happens, I think, especially out in Los Angeles a lot. You have a watershed moment in your life, something terrible that happens, and you really find out who your friends are.
Yes.
And so I narrowed down the number of people that I considered friends after that, which I think was great, and they're still really close friends of mine. That was a big part of it. And them encouraging me to be able to be resilient, be able to, not feel like it had been my fault.
Well, that's true, yeah.
Which is a big deal because he had been so close to me, and he had left going to UCLA, which is literally right up the street from where I lived, to University of Wisconsin, and it was partially, at the time I felt, because I was so focused on making my own career work, that I wasn't as connected to him as I felt like there would always be time.
Yeah, we often do that.
Yeah. And so, sorry. So then a part of it was things that I guess I kind of learned almost through some of the training as an actor. I know this sounds a little bit...
No, but it's true. Yeah,
but it's that I was present.
Yeah.
I accepted what was happening. I internalized it. And I didn't take responsibility for things that couldn't be attributed to my my actions that I didn't have control over. So I sort of accepted the things that I couldn't really control, and then honestly, so this horse movie, and then me having to learn how to ride a horse was a big deal. So literally, I got back on the horse because
So how soon was that movie? How long?
So funding fell out, didn't happen.
Okay.
But for 2 weeks, I had a crash course in riding a horse, and so I started out bareback. Cleaned stalls every morning, learned the anatomy of a horse, did everything.
Oh, wow.
All day, and so I didn't have time to think about really how sorry I was feeling for myself because I had to take care of this other animal that I was now responsible for. I had to learn how to do it. It's dangerous. So I had to understand the principles of it, and I had to listen to people and be present to them. And so I think that was a big part of actually me being able to come back to LA and kind of get my stuff together. And so
it's interesting, yeah.
I come back to LA, put my nose to the grindstone, decide that I will not have a social life and just work. And so I was in a couple of really good studios working. Did a couple of showcases, and then started working consistently as an actor. So
how old were you at this point?
How old?
Yeah, I'm trying to get a timeline.
So I was 26.
And then
between 25 and 26.
Was it months after?
So
happened with
I
your
was
brother
I was
when you were
in Wisconsin for probably about a total of 3 months. So
Okay,
a
so
month
that was-
was like the training, and then 2 months was other stuff.
It's all very fresh. So you get back and you do that, and then the funding falls out. And now,
Yeah.
But now you're working as an actor.
But now I'm working, and I'm dedicated to making sure that my family isn't worried about me.
Right.
So because it's a very unstable profession, and so I really, did everything I could to work hard. I, made contacts with every friend that I'd made through production. I ended up getting cast in an NBC commercial for Friends because of that. Got cast in a TV show called Providence, so I was a co-star on that for 3 episodes.
Yeah, I remember the show. Yep.
And then did a couple commercials, and then
How did you end up? How did you end up in the?
Yes, so then I get cast in it. So I get cast in a movie, a terrible B movie, and
I've done a couple.
While this is happening, the Army. I'm in the reserves at the time, the Army Reserve. So the Army engages me, and they say, "Hey, we'd like you to come back in the active Army for a year.
Yeah.
You owe 8 years because of your scholarship in the reserves, but if you come back in for a year, all you have to do is one more year in the reserves, and you're done." It was 2000, and so I was like, yeah, I think that's the right choice, because I kind of feel like the thing that I'm doing right now, career-wise, is very much about me. And I want to be able to do something that gives back to other people, because that, I think, would make me happiest at this moment. Not to mention the life experience and all the other things that I would be able to benefit from that. And so I put in...
I want to ask you a question about that, though. Like, do you think that comes from the way you were raised, or do you think that that's just something in you that, because not everybody feels that way.
Service?
Yeah, being of service to other people and choosing a career that is being of service. Like, where does that come from inside of you?
I don't know. I think if I were to try to put it into a box, I guess, would be a lot of it comes from like where people find happiness. And so I find a great deal of happiness in connecting other people to the things that make them happy. And when you're a leader in the military, that's literally your job. And so you're doing risk management, you're doing planning, and you're doing a lot of other stuff. But really, you're leading from the ground up. Mm-hmm. It's not like a lot of people imagine you're sort of on high and leading people or directing them from a pedestal. And really, it doesn't work that way. You have to engage them in what is their individual motivation. How do you get them to start thinking about someone other than themselves? And so, we have a lot of training that you do in the Army that you become inter-reliant or interdependent, and you understand that, we talk about right now, I think in the military quite a bit, the diversity is our strength, is that it really is that you're good at something and you're from somewhere and you have this skill, but you don't have all the ideas and you don't have all the right answers and you don't have all the skill and you don't have all the experience, but someone else could help create that mosaic that then solves the problem. And so the more you close yourself off to the possibility that someone else may have something to offer, the less likely you are to actually solve the problem. And so being able to be engaged in that, I think, is important. The Army, then, for me, was a great platform for me to be able to do that. I think a lot of jobs you can do that eventually when you're in management, but in the entertainment world, especially when you're a performer, you're not really in that role for a very long period of time until you're really influencing people that a lot of which you don't even see. Mm-hmm. And so this is a very tangible thing to be able to have, and something that I wanted to be able to see the fruits of my labor be able to be exhibited in the success of the people that were working with me.
And also your family, you come from a military family too. So
yeah, and I wasn't afraid of it. And that's the other thing, is I didn't grow up with this intrinsic fear that everyone in the military is damaged. Right. Because I knew enough people in the military, and most of them, almost all of them are not.
Right.
And if they are, whether physically or mentally, that there are systems that we actually have, more so than in a lot of places in civilian life, that actually provide you the resources that you can actually then continue to be a successful contributing member of society.
Nice. Yeah.
And so I took the opportunity.
So at the time you were like, I want to do something, I want to give of service, and now was the time. And yeah.
So I came back in, I was a communications officer, so I was responsible for anything from the internet, so the networks that we worked with, to satellite to ground communication, and then I had a bunch of technicians that basically worked for me. And I got assigned January 15th, 2001 to a Special Forces unit in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And then, as we all know, September 11th happened. And so my clock started ticking for my year in January. And my year, when my year was up, I was on an airfield so January 2002, I was on an airfield at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, palletizing, so preparing all of our equipment to go to combat over to Afghanistan. And so it was not where I would have imagined myself to have been, 2 years earlier, but it felt like I was the place that I needed to be. And then we deployed to combat. We had the opportunity to establish one of the first ground-to-satellite-based communication centers in Afghanistan, which is fantastic. We were given a tremendous amount of responsibility, but also latitude. So we were able to talk to a company. I had a 22-year-old soldier, 21-year-old soldier who I think actually was from California, as a matter of fact, come up with a technical solution for something where we could take satellite communications and get it into a computer. And now it's kind of taken for granted, but in 2001, that was a big deal. And so we worked with British Aerospace Engineering, who built this thing called the Joint Base Station. And it was this 21, 22-year-old kid who came up with this thing that he thought would work, that me as his boss empowered him to be able to do it. And then we created a whole new communication system really for Afghanistan. And
Wow.
so stuff like that is was
People
tremendous.
know, who knows about this?
But what's funny though is that, and so we talk about this at work quite a bit within my community, is that the things that we consider normal, other people don't necessarily consider
Yeah,
normal.
no, I would not consider that normal.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So all of a sudden you're in Afghanistan now.
Yeah.
You've created this whole new way of communication.
Yeah, so I did that, and then because I was one of a very small group of people that had combat experience but was a communications officer, when we decided that we were going to do a lot of the pre-invasion workup for Iraq, is that I was selected among a group of people to do the planning, part of the planning for the special operations portion of the invasion. So all of the SEALs and Green Berets and everyone that was doing stuff before the war actually started. So looking for Scuds, if you noticed, no Scuds got fired during the war, like securing the gas and oil platforms. So we were doing all of their communications, making sure it was working.
This is truly unbelievable. I've
a little bit different,
never actually been able
than where
to
I
speak to
started.
somebody who was like right there during all of this.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And then so what happened like during the war? What was that like?
So then so it was an interesting experience. And I knew at that point that I liked being an officer. I liked being able to be in a position to be able to help tap into people's talent and be able to help them exhibit it and give them some way and some support to be able to make it happen. But I wasn't super interested in just the communications aspect of it. So I had a boss who said to me, hey, have you ever considered being a Green Beret instead? You're a captain. That's usually when you go to the selection to be a Green Beret. And I was like, yeah, but it's pretty highly selective. Only 3% of the people make it through. And he said, I think, and so just like what I was doing to the people that worked for me, he did to me. He said, I think you have that within you. I am going to give you enough time to be able to train for it. Still do your job, 16 hours a day, but I'm going to give you 2 to 3 hours of training every day. So that then you can
make it up to 20 now.
You can prepare for it, right? Yeah, it's all relative when you're working
goodness.
7 days a week for several months at a time. But and so I came back, made it through the course, and then got assigned as a Special Forces officer to the 7th Special Forces Group, which is really Latin America based. But because of everything going on in the Middle East, we would do rotations to Afghanistan as well.
Wow. I mean, okay, so here I am, I'm listening to your story, and your whole presence is very strong and stoic. And no, it's true because, I didn't grow up in a military family. And so, but when I look at people like you, I always wonder, like, were there ever moments where you were just scared or that you were just, because I look at people like you going,
Yeah.
You're so strong and you're so focused on what you're doing, and a lot of people look to you for that.
Sure.
If they see any vulnerability, that's maybe not good. But in yourself, when maybe no one else knew,
Yeah.
what was one of your most afraid moments? Or
So first off, if you're going, so when I was especially a Special Forces team leader in Afghanistan, we were there for about 6.5 months, my rotation got cut short because I got injured and had to come home, and I'll get into that. But we were in direct combat contact with the enemy over 120 days of the 195 days that we were there. So we were.
You were like right in it.
Extraordinarily engaged, yeah, during that time, and to be that engaged and to not have a sense of fear, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
And so, it's the same thing we learned. So I went to airborne school in the United States Army back in Fort Benning when I was still a cadet in ROTC, and you learn during that training that it's not a normal thing to jump out of an aircraft while in flight. And so it's okay that your brain is saying, hey, this doesn't seem like it's okay.
You're going against all instinct.
But it's to not let that fear own you in the same time. Accept it, accept its presence, and then be able to operate in spite of it. Because that's really, that's sort of the definition of courage, right? Is that not that you are operating without fear, it's that you're operating in spite of fear. And so...
You know that you could help a lot of people with that message.
Well, maybe, I guess.
No, you can.
I guess I don't really. I try to, at least in work. I haven't really thought about talking about it
because people are very fearful of a lot of things.
Yeah.
But if they had even a fraction of what it is that was within you in those moments,
Sure.
And I'm sure you've had more than one.
Sure.
I'm sure you've had at least 50 or 60 doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
But the fact how you just said it was incredible, and for people to use that in their everyday lives too, right? So
yeah, and so a particularly fearful moment, or what could be a particularly fearful moment, I think there were a couple. So I got injured twice in Afghanistan, 3 times really, during one period of 7 months. The first time we were in an engagement with the Taliban. We were across basically the road of their headquarters, and got in a 3-day fire.
Oh my goodness.
Got in a 3 firefight. There were about 30 of us and
Wow.
about 120 of them.
Oh my gosh.
And because of where we were, we couldn't really get a lot of reinforcements to where we were because of the geography, because of the terrain. And so we just had to sit there and slug it out with them. And
What does that mean, sitting there and slugging it out?
So,
what does that mean?
Like anything you saw in Band of Brothers or Saving Private Ryan. So I was in charge. I didn't have at the time an Air Force guy attached to us. So I was in charge of talking to all the aircraft and the artillery that was sending in rounds to them. Me and then my senior non-commissioned officer, so my team sergeant, he was in charge really maneuvering our element. And then we had 20 Afghans that were attached to us that we had just met 2 weeks before. And so we were, it was pretty, so that's, I could go into the complexities, the technical aspects of it, but really what it is.
But you have to make massively huge decisions under so much pressure. How do you do that?
I think it sounds silly, but you take it one step at a time. And so you really put yourself in sort of a cognitive space where you slow things down. So it's a lot because you've been through so much training. So, and I'll talk a little bit about getting injured and then going through rehab and stuff like that. But there's so much that's spent on our training for special operations guys in the United States military.
Thank goodness.
Like,
thank goodness, though, right?
Probably $3 million a piece.
But that's what's got you through.
No, I think it's fantastic, and absolutely, as a country, we benefit from it.
Yes.
But because of that, you're in a way conditioned to this, but you're also assessed continually to see if you have the aptitude to be able to continue doing it over and over and over again.
Oh, wow.
And so that's partly why really not everyone makes it, is that the people that can do that then maybe don't have teamwork attributes, or they're not extroverted, they can't deal with a different culture